He once flew alongside the President of the United States, the man who held the life of an entire nation in his hands. But a few years later, he slept on the streets, anonymous, and almost forgotten. This is the unlikely story of a Marine One pilot, who once flew over the White House, only to find himself lost in the shadows of his own past. How did a hero fall so far? Before we dive into this incredible journey, let us know where you're watching from. Let's get started. Ethan Roberts once sat at the helm of Marine One, soaring through the skies just a few feet from the most powerful person in the world. As a Marine Corps pilot, he was tasked with carrying the President of the United States to safety, often flying over political landmarks, crowded cities, and bustling military bases. For almost 2 decades, Ethan's life was defined by duty, discipline, and the heavy responsibility of safeguarding the life of the Commander-in-Chief. He became a symbol of courage and unwavering loyalty, a man whose sacrifice and devotion to his country were etched into the very fabric of his existence. Yet, when his time in the service came to an end, the transition to civilian life wasn't as seamless as he had hoped. No longer surrounded by the structure of the military, Ethan found himself adrift, struggling to find a new purpose. The nightmares started soon after. The faces of soldiers, the echo of helicopter blades cutting through the air, and the haunting weight of responsibility seemed to follow him everywhere. He couldn't escape the trauma of his past, and the PTSD made every day a battle in itself. He tried to adapt, but the world outside of the military felt cold and unfamiliar. A painful divorce shattered his personal life, and the job he once found pride in slipped away. Slowly, like so many others who serve in silence, Ethan became invisible. Homelessness crept into his life, and the streets became his new reality. The man who once saved lives now found himself struggling to save his own. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Ethan sat on the worn park bench he called home for the past few months, a young college student named Emily walked past him. She was studying psychology at a nearby university and was used to seeing the homeless on the streets, yet something about Ethan's weathered face caught her attention. His eyes, deep and haunted, seemed to tell a story, one of a past far removed from the present life he now led. Emily had been walking through the park on her lunch break, listening to a podcast on her phone, when she noticed him. For some reason, today felt different. She took a hesitant step toward him, unsure whether to speak, but something inside her urged her to stop. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice tentative but kind. Ethan looked up, his face momentarily blank before his weary eyes softened. "Just tired," he muttered, his voice gravelly from years of pain and regret. There was a silence between them for a few moments, as Emily wasn't sure how to follow up. She glanced at him, noticing his worn-out jacket and the stack of old photographs tucked carefully into his bag. "What's in there?" Emily asked, pointing to the bag. Ethan hesitated but then pulled out a few faded photographs. One of them caught Emily's eye, an old black-and-white photo of a young man in military uniform standing next to a helicopter. She couldn't help but notice the pride in his posture, the strength in his face. "That's me," Ethan said, his voice quiet. "I used to fly Marine One, the President's helicopter. I was a pilot for the Marines." Emily blinked in disbelief. "You're telling me you were a Marine One pilot?" she asked, incredulous. Ethan nodded, his gaze distant as he looked at the photo. "I flew the President of the United States, kept him safe. That was my job for a long time. But that was before everything changed." The weight of his words lingered in the air, and Emily found herself speechless. It was hard to believe the man before her, sitting on this bench, had once been a figure of national security and pride. Yet there was something raw, something genuine in his eyes that made her realize that this was more than just a story, it was a life. A life that had once meant something and was now lost in the shadows. Emily felt a stirring in her heart. She knew she had to do something. She couldn't let this story fade into obscurity. The next few days, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the man she had met in the park. She kept replaying the moment in her head, the faded photographs, his quiet words, the solemn weight in his eyes. The more she thought about it, the harder it became to ignore the significance of what he had said. A Marine One pilot, a man who had once been at the center of history, now forgotten and lost on the streets. It didn't sit right with her. Ethan's story deserved more than just a passing conversation. She felt compelled to share it, not just as a story of tragedy, but as a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who serve their country. The idea struck her one evening as she sat at her desk, scrolling through her social media feed. People were quick to jump on trending stories, but this could be different. This could be a story that truly mattered. The next morning, Emily found herself back at the park. Ethan was there, sitting in his usual spot, his head slightly lowered as he stared at the ground. She approached him slowly, her heart beating a little faster. "Hey, Ethan," she said softly, sitting beside him on the bench. "I've been thinking about you. And your story." Ethan glanced at her, surprised. "My story?" "Yeah," she replied, pulling out her phone. "I want to share it. People need to hear it." Ethan looked skeptical. "Why would anyone care about an old soldier like me?" Emily smiled gently. "Because your story matters. You mattered. People don't always see the whole picture, what someone's been through, what they've sacrificed. But I think if I share your story, they will." He was quiet for a moment, then gave a resigned sigh. "I don't know." Emily didn't wait for him to finish. She began typing, telling his story as he had shared it with her, how he had flown Marine One, how he had served with pride and honor, and how it all came crashing down when his service ended. She included the photograph of Ethan standing next to the helicopter, looking every bit the hero he once was. When she finished, Emily hesitated for a moment before hitting post. She wondered if she was doing the right thing. But as soon as she shared it, something unexpected happened. Within hours, the post went viral. Comments flooded in from people praising Ethan's service, expressing their admiration for his bravery and sacrifice. But it was the veterans' messages that hit hardest, stories of their own struggles and how they understood what Ethan had gone through. Emily watched the reactions pour in, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. She had done it. She had given Ethan's story the voice it deserved. And, in doing so, she had given him something he thought he had lost, recognition. The world was listening. The day after Emily's post went viral, Ethan's life began to change in ways he never expected. It was as though the world had suddenly taken notice of him, of his story, of his pain, and of his triumphs. People who had once passed him by without a second glance were now stopping to offer him help, recognition, and support. The attention didn't stop at social media comments. A local veterans organization reached out to Emily, asking for more details about Ethan's situation. The organization offered him housing, therapy for his PTSD, and resources to help him reintegrate into society. Ethan was stunned by the outpouring of support. After years of feeling invisible, he was now the center of a community that cared, a community that wanted to help him reclaim his life. The first few days were overwhelming. Ethan was introduced to a team of therapists who specialized in PTSD and trauma. Slowly, the nightmares that had once tormented him began to recede. The intense anxiety and feelings of alienation lessened as he learned coping mechanisms and techniques to help manage his stress. It wasn't an overnight change, there were still tough days, but it felt like he was moving forward, step by step. As he settled into his new home, a small apartment provided by the Veterans Organization, Ethan started to feel a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He wasn't sleeping on the streets anymore. He wasn't fighting to survive each day. And though it was hard to admit, he had begun to realize that he wasn't alone in this journey. There were people, strangers, even, who cared about him, who wanted to see him succeed, and who wanted to hear his story. But the most profound change was in how he viewed himself. No longer just a forgotten veteran, Ethan began to see his past in a new light. The man who had once flown the President of the United States was still here, still capable of making a difference. His story had inspired so many, and now, he felt called to use that inspiration to help others who had walked a similar path. He wasn't done yet, far from it. Ethan had a new mission, to be the light for those still in the darkness. His journey wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about giving back. Ethan's newfound sense of purpose didn't just stop at his personal healing. As the weeks passed, he began to feel a deep, almost urgent desire to pay forward the kindness he had received. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't just a man trying to survive, he was someone who could help others, especially those who had faced the same struggles he had. One day, after attending a group therapy session for veterans, Ethan found himself talking to a fellow former Marine named Jack, who had been homeless for months after his discharge. Jack's story mirrored Ethan's in many ways: the struggle to fit into a civilian world, the trauma of combat, the isolation that came with it. Listening to Jack talk, Ethan saw himself in him, in the desperation, in the loss. But this time, instead of feeling like a victim of the same circumstances, he felt empowered to help. "You know," Ethan said after a long pause, "I've been there. I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel like you're invisible. But you don't have to stay there. You can rise above it. You can start over." Jack looked at him, uncertainty clouding his eyes. "Yeah? How do you know that?" Ethan smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "Because I did it. I was where you are, but I got help. And now, I want to help others. I want to make sure no one feels as alone as I did." From that moment on, Ethan became a mentor to others like Jack. He started volunteering at local veterans organizations, helping those who were struggling with PTSD, homelessness, or simply the adjustment to civilian life. His past, once a source of pain and regret, had now become his greatest strength. His experience as a Marine One pilot, once a symbol of his own loss, had transformed into a powerful tool for helping others heal. As Ethan mentored more veterans, he saw a shift not only in them but in himself. His own healing deepened as he witnessed the growth and recovery of those he helped. The man who had once been lost on the streets now found himself standing tall again, not as a hero of the past, but as a hero of the present, making a difference one life at a time. He had found a new opportunity, one that gave him the sense of fulfillment he had been searching for all along. Helping others wasn't just a way to heal his own wounds, it was his new mission, one that gave his life deeper meaning than he had ever imagined. The past was behind him, and the future, filled with purpose and connection, lay ahead. As Ethan continued to work with fellow veterans, a profound transformation took place within him. He began to understand that while his past had shaped who he was, it didn't have to define his future. The heroism that once felt distant, a fleeting moment in his past, became a foundation for something far greater: his ability to help others rise from their own struggles. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in his small apartment, he reflected on his journey. He thought about his days flying Marine One, those intense, high-stakes moments when the eyes of the world were watching, when his every decision mattered. But now, in the quiet of his apartment, he realized that those moments, as extraordinary as they had been, didn't hold the same weight in his heart as the work he was doing now. Helping another veteran find their footing, guiding someone through their darkest days, was far more meaningful than any moment of glory he had experienced. The man who once flew above the chaos of the world had found peace in the simple act of lifting others up. It was in the small victories, the shared laughter with a fellow veteran, the phone call from someone he had helped, that he found true fulfillment. Ethan no longer viewed himself as the pilot who once flew the president. He was now the man who helped veterans rebuild their lives, who offered hope when all seemed lost. The transformation was not just in his outward circumstances but in his heart. He had rediscovered his purpose, and with it, a new sense of pride, one that was rooted in humility and service to others. He wasn't a forgotten hero. He was a hero of today, shaping the future for those who needed him most. Months had passed since Ethan had first shared his story with Emily. The world had learned of his struggles, his sacrifices, and his incredible journey. But now, as he stood in front of a group of young veterans at a community event, he realized just how much he had changed. The man who had once been broken and lost had found his strength, not in the applause of the world, but in the quiet acts of kindness he shared with those who needed it most. "I used to fly the President of the United States," Ethan said, his voice steady and calm as he addressed the group. "But the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my life was helping those who fought beside me rise again." There was a pause, and the room fell silent as the weight of his words settled in. Ethan's story had come full circle. He wasn't just the pilot of Marine One anymore. He was a mentor, a guide, and a friend to those who had been through the same battles, both on the battlefield and in life. His journey wasn't about grand gestures or high-flying moments. It was about the quiet power of lifting someone else up, of being there for another person when they felt they had nothing left. Ethan had found a new kind of heroism, a heroism that didn't rely on recognition or fame, but on the simple act of making a difference in someone else's life. As the crowd applauded, Ethan stood tall, his heart full. He had found his true calling. He had found a life that was worth living, not because of what he had done in the past, but because of what he was doing now. And that, to him, was the greatest achievement of all. Ethan's story became a powerful reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they are the ones who have been forgotten, living on the margins, struggling to make sense of a world that has moved on without them. But even in their darkest moments, they have the power to rise again. All it takes is a helping hand, a kind word, or a listening ear. The real heroes aren't always the ones in the spotlight, they are the ones who quietly transform lives, offering support and understanding to those who need it most. Ethan's journey teaches us that even after we've fallen, we can always find the strength to stand back up. And sometimes, the greatest battles we fight are the ones we face within ourselves. Every person has a story, and sometimes, just listening can change everything. Ethan's life is proof that even the smallest acts of kindness can save a life. Inspired by Ethan's resilience? Show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more life-changing content. Drop a comment below and let us know how you've overcome challenges in your own life.